The air was thick with unspoken words, a tension that crackled like static. Grace stood at the edge of the room, her heart pounding in rhythm with the muffled applause echoing from the ceremony. Why was she always the shadow in her family's spotlight? The glossy pamphlet felt like a weight in her hand, each embossed letter a reminder of her absence. As she scanned the names, a bitter taste filled her mouth, her brother's triumph overshadowing her own sacrifices. How could they celebrate a hero while erasing the one who fought for recognition? The ache of neglect surged within her, igniting a fierce determination to reclaim her story. This wasn't the first time Grace had been left in the shadows. For as long as she could remember, her family had quietly ignored her, dismissing her triumphs as if they didn't matter. She stood there, wearing her full-dress uniform, medals pinned to her chest like an anchor, and felt the weight of the silence that hung between her and the people who were supposed to love her. They had invited her, yes, but only as an afterthought. The invitation had arrived just 3 days ago, stamped with the family crest and a cold, impersonal note from Jessica. "We hope you'll join us, Grace. It's a family milestone." She had driven across the country, Nevada to Maryland, in just 2 days, the endless road a cold and bitter companion. Each mile erased a layer of doubt, but not the ache in her chest. She didn't tell anyone she was coming, not Margaret, not Hargrave, not even her unit. She didn't want comfort. She didn't want warnings. She wanted to see for herself. And now, standing there, her brother's name splashed across the ceremony pamphlet 7 times while hers was nowhere to be found, Grace knew she would no longer be invisible. Her story was hers to tell. Donald leaned against the fireplace, whiskey glass in hand, commanding the room with 2 of Lucas's old ROC buddies. Lucas stood tall and polished, recounting a rehearsed tale about navigating hostile terrain with nothing but grit and a compass. He pointed to a framed photo on the mantel, showing us side by side in desert gear. But it was cropped. Only his name graced the caption. I lingered by the bookshelf, half hidden, half watching. Occasionally, someone would glance my way, then quickly look away, unsure if I was real or just a ghost in my pressed blues. "You didn't RSVP," Jessica said, her voice a mix of syrup and steel. "I didn't know I was invited," I replied, still facing away. Her laugh was tight, almost mocking. "Of course you were. It's a family event," Lucas insisted, his tone light but dismissive. I turned to face Jessica. Her eyes flicked to my ribbons, then back to my face, careful not to linger. "You look formal," she said, her smile unwavering. "It's a service event," I shot back. "Yes, but most guests wear suits." Before I could respond, she snatched the program from my hand. "Isn't it lovely? We hired a local designer. Very tasteful." I couldn't hold back. My name's not in it. A brief pause hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. She pressed her lips together, feigning concern. "I'm sure it was just a formatting oversight. The focus is on Lucas, of course." I didn't blink. We were in the same campaign. "Yes," she said slowly, "but he's still enlisted. You're more administrative now, aren't you?" Silence enveloped me. She adjusted the gold chain around her neck, her eyes glinting with a mix of pity and disdain. "Honestly, Grace, I wouldn't make a scene. Tonight is about celebrating. Let's not drag old wounds back into the spotlight." Funny how she framed my silence as drama, my restraint as a threat. The room erupted into applause as Lucas wrapped up another story. I glanced toward the hallway mirror, seeing a dozen people clapping and laughing as if nothing were missing. But I felt it. The weight of absence, the sting of neglect. I was there, yet invisible, longing to break through the surface of their celebration. Would they ever see me? Would they ever recognize my fight, as if my name had never been spoken, never written, never needed? There I was, in uniform, still showing up day after day. I led missions across continents, but in my own home, I was just a ghost. The silence in my Nevada apartment felt different than the one in Annapolis. Here it was thick, filled with dust and distance, not indifference. The harsh desert light sliced through the blinds, glaring and impersonal. I hadn't even unpacked since the trip. My uniform jacket still dangled from a chair, creased from the drive. Lucas's ceremony pamphlet lay forgotten on the table next to an envelope from Jessica. I didn't know if I should trash it or frame it as proof of my invisibility. I opened my laptop and signed into the secure archive. That morning, a declassification notice had popped up. Operation Hawthorne was officially unsealed. 4 years of strategic silence gone in a flash. Weeks of planning. 3 lost drones. A dozen lives, all under my command. I scanned the report summary, my fingers clenching the trackpad. One name leapt from the screen, Captain Lucas Halberg. No Lieutenant Cole Grace Halberg, not even a mention. My breath caught, a familiar burn tinged with anger bubbling up like acid. I clicked deeper, comm logs, GPS trails, internal assessments. I recognized my own phrasing in the daily sit-reps. The threat escalation protocols I'd painstakingly crafted were there, but my signature, it was listed as someone else's now. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, feeling history erased. Then my phone rang, a steady tone echoing in the stillness. I didn't have to check the screen. Only one person used a landline these days. "Hi, Grandma," I said. Margaret Halberg wasted no time on pleasantries. "They think they can erase you with paper and speeches," she said, her voice rasping like the dry Nevada air. "They're doing a decent job," I muttered, frustration swelling in my chest. As I sat in that dimly lit room, the weight of my uniform grew heavier. The silence felt different, laden with unanswered questions. Then came a creak, the door slightly ajar, a faint knock echoing from the hallway, unexpected and unnerving. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the report still unread, a bittersweet reminder of everything I had left behind. What was the cost of remaining invisible? Was I truly ready for what lay ahead? The cursor blinked on the screen, the cold glow of the laptop casting a sharp light on Grace's determined face. She could feel the weight of the moment, the silent tension settling around her like a heavy fog. Was this really a chance for her to finally claim her place, or had she walked into something far more dangerous? The email hovered in her mind, answers, but also more questions. The truth felt like it was just out of reach. Could she trust what she was seeing? Could she still be the one to take control? "You don't need their invitation to exist, Grace. You never did." The words echoed in her head, a stark reminder of everything she'd fought for and everything she had been denied. A pause. "You showed up anyway. I wanted to see it for myself." "Good. Now make sure they see you." After the call, Grace returned to the laptop. Another email, this one marked as a priority from Lieutenant Colonel. It was about Hawthorne, the operation that had nearly cost her everything. "I tried to flag the report," the email read. "What they posted is incomplete. No mention of the southern flank maneuver. You coordinated that from the drone blind. You kept us from losing the whole battalion. I'd swear under oath you were in command." Grace stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. She opened the archived report, the one only a handful had access to. The operational maps, the coded call signs, the chain of command, it all matched, everything but the signature block. There it was, Lucas Halberg's name. Neat, clean, too perfect, a name that didn't belong. She checked the metadata, edited 5 months after the final submission. 5 months after her promotion to lieutenant colonel, a promotion she had asked the department not to publicize. She hadn't wanted Lucas to feel overshadowed, she had been kind, but this was betrayal. She opened the final report's scan. A small note buried in the admin logs read, amended for internal consistency per D. Halberg's 32142-1D. Her father. The truth hit like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just bureaucracy, it was calculated. Her father's legal training, his favors, his connections in military policy, it was all there, all used to erase his daughter from the record, replacing her with his son. This wasn't favoritism, it was manipulation. Grace's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved quickly. She downloaded the original, unaltered files, every log, every edit note. She wasn't just fighting for recognition, she was fighting for her very existence. The battle was far from over, but this time Grace would make sure they saw her. I wanted timestamps, IP addresses, revision histories. They had rewritten the report once. They wouldn't get the chance again, time to show them who really commanded that battlefield. Even with my ID, they asked me to wait outside. The sun over Arlington was unseasonably sharp, bouncing off the Academy's pale marble and ceremonial brass. Flags lined the walkway like teeth, tight, silent, unyielding. I adjusted the hem of my charcoal suit and stepped toward the entrance gate, ignoring the tension already rising in my chest. This wasn't my first time being held at the door. A few years ago, I'd been denied access to the Defense Policy Summit in D.C., even though I was on the operations panel. I'd made the mistake of walking in without my rank badge. They thought I was someone's aide, maybe an intern. After an hour of arguing and a phone call to Land General Hardwick, I got in barely. No apology. But this wasn't Washington. This was family. Or so I told myself like a fool. The guard at the gate was young, mid-20s buzz-cut, clean lines. He looked at my military ID, then down at the guest list on his tablet. His brow furrowed. "Grace Halberg?" he asked, tilting the screen toward me. "Yes," I said. He tapped a few times. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name's not listed." I didn't flinch. I received a formal invitation. "This event is for Operation Resolute Spear, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Active and honorary mentions." He hesitated. "Do you have a printed copy of the invite?" "No," I said flatly. It was handy, delivered from Jessica Helberg. That made him straighten. "Wait here, please." He walked off, leaving me in the shadow of the gate's arch. Cars pulled in behind me, guests in tailored suits and flowing dresses stepping out. I watched a woman adjust her son's tie while the father shook hands with another officer. Music drifted faintly from inside brass, tuning up soft chatter beneath it. Then I saw her. The air was thick with anticipation as Hannah Monroe stepped into the hall, her heart pounding like a drum. She had fought tooth and nail for recognition, but today felt different. The scent of rain lingered, mingling with the crispness of freshly polished marble. As she moved deeper into the crowd, a hushed conversation caught her attention. Hannah Monroe. The name floated through the air, reverent and heavy. It sliced through her like a knife, shifting everything she thought she knew about her family's neglect. Had she been wrong all along? Was the truth lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for her to uncover it? Hannah had always been the brave one, the strong-willed fighter in a family that often overlooked her. She was determined to confront the shadows of her past, to assert her identity in a world that seemed intent on keeping her invisible. But as she stood there, the weight of her family's expectations pressed down on her, a reminder of the struggle for belonging that had defined her life. The guard at the entrance had been skeptical, his young face betraying no emotion as he scanned her military ID. "Your name isn't listed," he said, his voice flat. But just as doubt began to creep in, a familiar voice rang out from behind the gate. "She's with me." Margaret Halberg, her grandmother, stood tall and unwavering, a cane in one hand, her presence commanding respect. The guard hesitated, caught between duty and instinct. Hannah held his gaze, a silent challenge. Finally, he stepped aside, and she walked in, the whispers of her name trailing behind her like smoke. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Conversations paused, then resumed in forced tones, eyes darting her way. She felt the weight of judgment, the frowns and whispers, but she pressed on. Each step echoed louder than any shout she could muster, a declaration of her presence. As she approached the main reception area, she spotted Jessica, her mother, by the podium. The disbelief in her eyes was palpable. "You shouldn't be here," Jessica whispered, her voice laced with tension. Hannah smiled, a mix of defiance and hope. Today, she would reclaim her story. Today, she would show them all who she truly was. The scent of gunpowder hung in the air, mixing with distant memories, a painful reminder of everything her family had endured. Hannah Monroe closed her eyes, hearing the echoes of explosions intertwined with her brother's laughter, a haunting melody of what once was. The sun's warmth brushed against her skin, a stark contrast to the chill of Ryan's absence. She could almost hear her mother, Jessica's voice, strained and far off, desperately trying to hold their family together. In this moment, the weight of her brother's honor felt heavy, overshadowing her own struggles. It ignited a fire inside her, an insatiable need to reclaim her identity. And yet, there it was, Lucas Halberg, commander. No mention of the true strategist. The projector flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow over the polished oak stage. The seal of the United States Army gave way to bold white text, Operation Resolute Spear Command narrative. I sat back in the auditorium beside Margaret, our spot reserved for family. Only half the seats were filled. The real audience gathered in front, senators, generals, Gold Star families. The atmosphere buzzed with rehearsed reverence, just an hour until the televised ceremony where Lucas would be exalted nationally. But first came this dry run. Lucas stood tall in his tailored dress uniform, flanked by 2 aides and a communications tech. "Good afternoon," he started, clearing his throat. 4 years ago, in the heat of Northern Hawthorne's escalation, I stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. His voice flowed, measured, and perfectly humble. I'd heard the cadence before, years ago when he'd recited Model UN speeches in front of the bathroom mirror, back when Sis was the only title I needed. I opened my notebook. With limited personnel and no drone support, I coordinated our units into a pincer maneuver. Each phrase flowed like a familiar song, painfully accurate. I traced his words. I had spoken them myself to Rowe, to Hargrave, even to the War College panel after my deployment. I remembered the sweat trickling down my back, hands shaking, knowing I might only be a name in their recordings. The dissonance gnawed at me. Was my brother's glory another brush over my existence? The pressures mounted. Would I ever be more than the shadow cast by someone else's brilliance? As the run-through continued, doubt lurked like a predatory beast. But, as the applause echoed, I promised myself I would break free. Today, I wouldn't fade away. Today, I would claim my story. Beside me, Margaret leaned in, her cool hand resting on my wrist. It was steady, a silent signal that said, "It's time." Lucas was still up there, narrating my work as if he had created it. He wasn't winging it. He had rehearsed this until it felt like his own lived experience. The screen shifted again, revealing tactical overlays, the visual backbone of the operation, color-coded paths, terrain shifts, infrared patterns. I knew them by heart. I had spent countless nights hunched over these graphics, coordinating unit locations with air support, solving problems no algorithm could touch. But now, in bold letters at the top of the slide, it read, "Mission Design, Captain Lucas Halberg." My lips parted in disbelief. I barely registered the audience murmuring in admiration, officers nodding at the brilliance of his flanking sequences. I sat frozen, the lies spreading like weeds, choking every truth. He wasn't just stealing credit, he was rewriting history. When the rehearsal wrapped up, the lights flickered back on, and aides began collecting notes. Lucas descended the stage with ease, shaking hands, basking in praise. He hadn't seen me in the back, or maybe he had, and chose to ignore me. Margaret remained still, her hands resting over her cane. "This is how dynasties work," she murmured softly. "One child becomes a monument, the other a shadow." I exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to confront him right then. This wasn't the moment. Not yet. My phone vibrated in my lap. I glanced down, a text from Roe. "Commander wants to speak to you privately." He didn't ask why I waited this long. He just said, "I'm glad you didn't wait longer." The air in the common office felt thick, like the moments before a storm breaks. Sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds, casting stripes across the mahogany table in front of me. The scent of rain lingered in the air, a reminder of the brewing storm outside. My heart raced, caught between the weight of betrayal and the flicker of hope. Would I finally find my voice? Would I reclaim my story? The tension was palpable, a tightrope walk between fear and determination. I could feel the world shifting beneath me, and I knew I had to act. Today, I wouldn't fade into the background. Today, I would rise. As I sat there, across from General Hargrave, everything felt charged. The dim room held a weight, a tension. It was more than just a meeting. It was a reckoning. The general leaned back, his face a hard mask of experience, framed by memories of battles fought and won. Behind him, a photo of the 203rd Tactical Regiment sat quietly, a silent witness to the decades of dedication etched into his brow. Then he pushed a thick folder towards me. The red stamp, declassified, seemed to scream for attention. "I read the original Hawthorne records today," he said, his voice steady. Those words sent a chill through me. My thoughts raced. What did he mean by original? He continued, sliding the folder open, revealing maps and comms traffic I was all too familiar with. But there it was, plain as day, my signature on documents dated weeks before my brother claimed glory for that mission. He called it a mission he led, but we both knew who really commanded it. "I know who commanded that mission," Hargrave said, locking eyes with me, "and it wasn't your brother." That struck deep, but I pushed back, the question burning on my tongue. "Then why am I still not on the program?" He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "Do you want to be?" The room held its breath. I thought about every moment I'd backed away, from the spotlight, from the accolades, thinking it was safer that way. For too long, I had let the fear of being overlooked overshadow my true self. "I don't want a speech," I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I don't want applause. I want the truth out there, unfiltered. A truth that refused to be overshadowed by my brother's facade of success. I just want it on record that I'm more than a shadow." General Hargrave nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Good, because I just added a line to my speech. He slid a fresh sheet toward me, an acknowledgement of the fight I was ready to reclaim. Here, in this pivotal moment, everything changed. It wasn't just about proving my worth, it was about finally stepping into my light, confronting the neglect that had haunted me for so long. The flicker of recognition sparked a determination I hadn't felt in ages. Would this finally be the moment I transformed the hollow ache into a fire that burned brightly? Would I break the cycle of silence and speak my truth? My heart raced with possibilities. The walls might have constricted, but today I was ready to rise. It was brief, just an addendum. Acknowledgement of the commanding officer of Operation Hawthorne. No drama, no flourish, just one correction, one name. "You don't have to walk on stage," he added, "but you'll be recognized publicly on the record. You'll be unerased." I exhaled slowly. For the first time in days, the tension in my shoulders lifted just slightly. It wasn't vengeance, it wasn't triumph, but it was something. My phone buzzed again, a text from row stage setup complete. Cameras are live. See you in 30. I stood smoothing my suit jacket. Thank you, General. He gave me a wry smile, then extended his hand. Let's give them a name. They tried to erase General Grace Halberg. Lucas stood at the podium, decorated with my blood and sweat. The cameras panned slowly across the rows of polished metals and crisp uniforms. Under the soft lights of the Arlington Hall, the ceremony unfolded like a pageant rehearsed reverent televised live for military networks nationwide. The flags hung heavy behind the stage, each representing the commands involved in Operation Resolute Spear, each one bearing witness. I sat midway down the center aisle, invisible in a sea of gleaming brass and white gloves. Margaret sat beside me, spine-straight cane tucked to her side. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Lucas adjusted the microphone. Distinguished guests, officers, veterans, family. His voice rang clear, confident. I knew that tone. He had coached him through it once when he failed a tactical simulation in officer school and called me in a panic. I spent 3 weeks tutoring him in strategic analysis over midnight video calls while I was stationed in Kandahar. He never once said thank you. Now he stood bathed in the glow of admiration, telling my story. Operation Hawthorne tested every principle of modern warfare, he said. With limited comms and terrain compromise, I had to make decisions that would affect the survival of over 200 soldiers. The audience murmured approval. The air was thick with tension, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I could almost taste the metallic tang of fear that hung around us like a curtain. My heartbeat echoed in my ears as I remembered the cold, sterile walls of the conference room where I once sat, invisible among the authority figures. They were all discussing options, strategies, plans, but none considered the voice that remained unheard. The smell of burnt coffee wafted through the air, an unwelcome reminder of countless overlooked moments. In that moment, I was not just an observer. I was a warrior hidden in plain sight, yearning to reclaim my place at the table. I watched Lucas at the podium, his hands gesturing to the screen behind him. The now familiar tactical map emerged, my contours, my annotations, the same field designations I'd burned into muscle memory. But this time, something was different. In the corner of the slide, usually reserved for title and reference metadata, a name appeared. Command Strategy Architect Lieutenant Cole G. Halberg. The font was small but unmistakable. For a moment, silence enveloped the room. Then I heard the shift, the first murmurs from the front rows. A general leaned toward his aide, journalists tapped frantically on their tablets, and a Navy Rear Admiral squinted at the screen, then back at her briefing folder. Lucas faltered for just a second, glancing back at the screen, eyes narrowing, a tiny crack in his mask, but he pressed on. Through careful coordination and adaptive maneuvering, the second slide appeared. Another strategic overlay, another signature, final field authorization G. Halberg. The audience noise swelled, polite confusion curdling into curiosity. Someone behind me whispered, "Wasn't she intel?" Then came the voice that silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Hargrave said, rising from his seat and approaching the microphone, "allow me to correct the record." He paused, letting the sentence land like a hammer on marble. Lucas froze mid-sentence. Hargrave nodded toward the screen, calm and composed. The tactical brilliance of Operation Hawthorne has long been credited to the officers in the field, but the true architect of that mission is sitting among us today. I didn't have to say a word. The document spoke louder than Lucas ever had. The room behind the stage transformed from a green room into a battlefield. Officers in dress uniform huddled in knots, murmuring over tablets and briefing folders. Screens replayed the last slides of the ceremony on loop. Hargrave's voice echoed faintly from a recording. The true architect sitting among us today. In that moment, I felt the weight of years of struggle lift slightly. I was no longer overlooked. I was seen. I was Hannah Monroe, and I had finally reclaimed my identity. I stood against the far wall, near the windows, silent, letting the weight of the moment settle in. The scent of rain lingered in the air, mixing with the tension that crackled like static. Lucas slumped in a leather chair, jaw clenched, his eyes darting between the screen and the polished floor. Jessica hovered nearby, her controlled outrage simmering just beneath the surface. She had been whispering furiously to him for the last 10 minutes, but he remained unresponsive. Roe stepped beside me, handing over a copy of the official operation dossier. Declassified just hours ago, it was now posted in the internal command archives. Full attribution restored, metadata included. I took it without a word, feeling the weight of its significance. He hesitated, then added, "They're already quoting it in the briefing room. Joint Command is convening a panel Monday. The room's shifting fast." From the opposite side, Hargrave approached, calm and measured, clipboard in one hand, a sealed envelope in the other. "You've got admirers," he said with a faint smile, "and some very nervous old brass in D.C. Then, as if on cue, a massive screen behind the stage flickered to life again, broadcasting directly to the media chamber just off the hall. A scanned copy of the original Hawthorne battle strategy glowed blue against white, complete with timestamp and signature at the bottom. Lead Command Brigadier General Hannah Monroe, approved by Joint Operational Command Pacific Theater. A hush fell over the room. Even the murmurs died. Jessica hissed through her teeth. That file was never meant to be public. Lucas looked like he might say something, but his throat visibly tightened. For a man so comfortable at the podium, he suddenly seemed allergic to air. Then Hargrave stepped forward again, his voice calm and deliberate. "To those wondering about accuracy, let me be very clear. This document was reviewed by the Office of Inspector General and the Department of Strategic Ethics. It is authentic. It reflects not only battlefield decisions but the chain of command as it truly existed." The air thickened with tension. Lucas's eyes widened in disbelief, and Jessica's outrage morphed into a mix of pride and fear. The revelation that Hannah, long overlooked, was now at the heart of a national scandal sent ripples through the gathered crowd. The weight of her family's neglect suddenly felt lighter, replaced by the gravity of her newfound recognition. In that moment, I felt the years of struggle lift slightly. I was no longer overlooked. I was seen. I was Hannah Monroe, and I had finally reclaimed my identity. Effective immediately, the record will reflect Brigadier General Hannah Monroe as the commanding strategist of Operation Hawthorne. No applause, no gasps, just an eerie stillness that could shatter the bravest of souls. Lucas finally found his voice. "Sir, I wasn't aware there was a mix-up. I thought it was just a clerical oversight. I never asked for my name on that command file." His words stumbled into the silence. "Stop," Hargrave interjected, his tone calm but firm. "Your name didn't appear accidentally. The record of edits, some of which were routed through your father's private server, suggests otherwise." Lucas, visibly rattled, struggled to speak. From the back of the room, Margaret's steady gaze felt like an anchor in the storm brewing around me. I stood still, silent. No need to speak. I locked eyes with the cameras pointing at me, media teams waiting for a sound bite that would never come. I didn't flinch. Let them question my resolve. Let the silence hang like a sword over their heads. Hargrave unrolled a final sheet of paper, the tension mounting. "Additionally," he said, "the following is now entered into the public record. Service citations for Unit Kilo 17 under General Monroe's direction. Each soldier attributed their survival to decisions she made on the ground." As he read the names, 10, 11, 12, Each one was another nail in the coffin of Lucas Halberg's mythos. Lucas stood frozen, shoulders taut, his fingers fidgeting at his lapel where rows of pins glimmered, hollow symbols of promises unfulfilled. Then a tall officer in dark navy leaned in, hand on Lucas's shoulder, voice low but unmistakable. "Your promotion's under review." They erased me from the guest list, so I let them announce me on national television. The stage lights flooded the room in a golden hue, surreal, like a scene ripped from a play. Cameras zeroed in on the podium. Microphones glistened across rows of polished seats, and in that moment, I felt it. Years of struggle lifting. I was Hannah Monroe. I was no longer overlooked. I was finally seen, reclaiming my identity in the spotlight. Hundreds packed the hall, officers, veterans, families, fixated on the man standing tall at center stage. General Hargrave cleared his throat, the tension in the room thick like fog. The low murmurs from earlier swirled before vanishing into silence. Adjusting his glasses, he locked eyes with the front row. "Before we wrap tonight's ceremony," he began, "there's another name we must recognize." My breath caught in my throat. Margaret barely brushed my hand, a fleeting connection before she pulled away. "There has been a gross oversight." Hargrave's voice rang clear and strong, cutting through the air. "For far too long, recognition has slipped through the cracks. Tonight, we set that right." He turned to face the cameras, the crowd drawn in like moths to a flame. "Please stand with me as we welcome General Hannah Monroe back to her rightful place." What came next wasn't applause. It was chairs scraping, dozens, then hundreds rising in a wave of acknowledgement. Almost everyone stood, except for Lucas, seated, armor of indifference locked around him. Next to him, Jessica's arms were crossed, lips pinched tight with resentment. They didn't move, but I did. Slowly, I rose. My dress uniform glimmered, every ribbon and bar catching the golden light. This moment felt surreal. I had left this armor tucked away, like an afterthought in the closet. But tonight? Tonight, I wore every piece, feeling their weight on my shoulders. The aisle opened before me, the air thick with anticipation. Phones rose, flashes popped. This time, the world was ready for me. Hargrave met me at the stage's edge, his hand outstretched. I took it. Behind us, a screen lit up with bold letters. Brigadier General Hannah Monroe, Command Strategist, Operation Hawthorne. Just as the crowd began to rise, a murmur swept through, charged with disbelief. I stood frozen, the spotlight illuminating my strength while exposing my raw vulnerability. This wasn't the honor I had fought for. It felt foreign, a spotlight I never craved to inhabit. The scent of polished wood and formal attire clashed with the storm within me. My family's whispered confessions echoed in my mind. What was meant to be a moment of glory twisted into a reckoning, confronting the neglect that shadowed my journey. How could something so beautiful feel so heavy? This was my identity, reclaimed but tainted with the ashes of my past struggles. As the faces in the crowd blurred, my heart raced. Would they finally acknowledge me, or would I always be overlooked? The noise faded out, replaced by the thoughts swirling in my mind. I was Hannah Monroe. I was finally seen, battling through the chaos of a legacy that tried to erase me. For one breathless moment, the room hung in silence. Then it started. Claps erupted, growing into a thunderous wave of recognition. A young woman in uniform stood at the side, maybe 24, tears glistening on her cheeks, hands clasped tightly. When our eyes locked, she whispered something I could still hear over the noise. She's the reason I stayed. A knot tightened in my throat. I turned to the microphone, but the moment weighed heavy enough to keep me still. I looked out past the stage, through the camera lenses, towards faces I couldn't see. The girls in ROC classes, the women serving on the front lines, soldiers who'd been sidelined, silenced, rewritten. This was for them. And then it came, the bold voice of a reporter cutting through the air. "General Halberg, do you have any words for your family?" I met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "No," I replied simply. "This isn't their moment." Across from me sat my mother, a picture of pearls and shame. The scent of her perfume, like old roses mixed with something sterile, hung around us, the kind of fragrance for a guest who'd never unpack. She'd picked the hotel closest to the academy, staying close enough to watch but far enough to pretend she wasn't part of it all. Stiffly, she sat, hands folded in her lap, nails manicured to perfection. Those pearls, her go-to for every major family event, glimmered in the light, echoing unspoken tension. Not once did she meet my gaze. Placing a manila folder gently on the glass coffee table between us, I didn't open it. She knew what was inside. Her eyes darted to it, then back to me. "Grace, I thought perhaps we could talk," she began, voice dipping into a hopeful tone. "Just the two of us. No cameras, no generals, no statements." I gave her nothing, just silence. She tried again, her voice small. "We're still family, despite everything." I leaned back, the weight of our shared history hanging in the air. "You said that once before." My heart thrummed with uncertainty, conflicts bubbling beneath the surface. Would this finally be our moment? Would I break through the stone walls between us, or would we remain forever trapped in the echoes of our past? The moment hung in the air, thick with the unsaid. Hannah Monroe stood there, heart pounding, every second feeling like an eternity. The tension between her and her mother was electric, each breath heavy with their shared past. In that flickering candlelight, Hannah caught a glimpse of doubt in her mother's eyes, a mirror reflecting her own insecurities. What if I never get the chance to prove myself? The thought echoed in her mind, a haunting refrain, a silence stretched between them, taut and ready to snap. Would this fragile moment shatter their connection, or could it carve out a new path forward? The answer danced just out of reach. Then, she opened the manila folder, the original nomination letter for a long-deserved promotion. "Remember this?" Hannah challenged, her voice steady. The elegant pen strokes of her mother's handwriting marred its edges, reading like a betrayal. "Let's delay until Lucas establishes himself." 2 years ago, she'd drafted an email meant for Hannah, but fear kept it hidden. "I didn't want you dragged through the spotlight," her mother had said, the trepidation clear. But was it really about protection? Or was it about keeping the family name intact? Hannah pressed further, her resolve like granite. "You were scared of being outshined. You let him think he was destined for greatness while I chased shadows." The tears flowed freely from her mother, the kind that once silenced rooms. But they didn't hold the same power anymore. "You wanted me quiet. You got your wish. Until now." The words hung, heavy with the weight of an unspoken truth. The mother who sat in front of her, polished and composed, was crumbling beneath the facade. "I lost both my children tonight," her mother whispered, voice trembling. A sharp breath escaped Hannah. She stood tall, took the folder, and moved to the door. "No," she replied, hands steady on the handle. "You lost the one who never belonged to you." Hers was a declaration, a fierce reclaiming of her identity against years of neglect. The air crackled anew, charged with possibility. Would this be the moment they'd both break the chains of their past? Or was the fracture inevitable? Only time would reveal the truth they had long avoided. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of lemon oil and something older. Dust, perhaps, a reminder of history. Framed citations and portraits of long-retired officers lined the walls, their expressions frozen in time, caught mid-decade, mid-command, mid-pride. I stood behind the podium, not just a forgotten daughter or a soldier reclaiming her space, but as someone ready to create something that had never existed before. The reporters had arrived early, eager for the scoop on my reinstatement. Word had spread like wildfire about the televised ceremony and the strategic credits. They craved follow-ups, stories, anything that could spark controversy and justify a headline. But today wasn't about them. It was about the dozen cadets seated in the front row, 4 women, 2 with ribbons still fresh from basic training, 1 sporting a wrist brace from a field injury. They looked at me not as a celebrity, but as proof that change was possible. Margaret sat beside the stage in her favorite navy coat, fingers clasped around a folder embossed in gold. I leaned into the mic, my heart racing. Today, we're announcing the launch of the Margaret Initiative for Women in Defense. The room shifted, pens scratched, cameras clicked. This fund will provide strategic training grants, mentorship, access, and deployment stipends for women pursuing leadership roles in military intelligence and combat command. It's named for the woman who taught me that service doesn't begin on a battlefield. It begins in silence when you choose to speak for someone else first. Margaret's eyes shimmered, but she didn't smile. She simply nodded, proud yet private. Afterward, the reporters took their turns. What motivated you to start this now? What do you say to those who question the accuracy of the documents? Are you still on active command? Then came the question I had anticipated. Do you still consider yourself a Halberg? As I adjusted the microphone, an unexpected glitch in the sound system echoed my thoughts back to me. Forgotten daughter, forgotten daughter, forgotten daughter. The crowd leaned in, intrigued, whispers brewing among the ranks of well-pressed uniforms. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, my estranged brother, Ryan Matthews. He approached the podium not as a spectator, but as a challenge, gripping a faded family photo that felt like a dagger in my heart. The air thickened with tension, bittersweet nostalgia colliding with present fears. You think you can just erase the past? He shot, his voice cutting through the silence. I took a breath, steadying myself. I'm not erasing anything. I'm reclaiming my story. The room held its breath, the weight of our shared history hanging in the air. Would this confrontation shatter the fragile connection we had, or could it carve out a new path forward? Only time would reveal the truth we had long avoided. It was always going to come down to blood. I paused, letting the silence build. I don't need to renounce the name, I said evenly. I just need to define it on my own terms. The Halberg name had once been a shackle, silencing me. Now it was my introduction. That quote would echo across 6 publications within hours. By day's end, my speech had racked up over 3 million views. Messages flooded in from former cadets, senior officers, even young civilians from military families. Most said the same thing. You said what I couldn't. That night, back in my office at the academy, I opened the window, letting in the cool night air. The faint sound of marching cadence drifted from the quad below, a reminder of my roots. Margaret had left her folder behind, but I didn't move it. It was part of the room now, like the photo of me shaking Hargra's hand or the framed page from my first field journal. I turned on the small desk lamp and reached for the manuscript beside my chair. My memoir was still unfinished, but it was no longer untold. The title I had finally settled on, Command Without Permission, stared back at me. Just as I was reviewing the last paragraph, I heard the door creak open behind me. Footsteps, hesitant. I turned to see Lucas standing in the doorway, hands shoved deep in his pockets, tie askew. I read your book, he said quietly. She wrote the truth in ink, then buried it between pages she hoped I'd never find. The morning light slanted through the lace curtains of Margaret's reading room, soft and golden, the way it always felt in old houses, with wooden floors and memory-thick air. I had woken early, restless, and found Margaret already in the corner chair, flipping through the thick Halberg family ledger she'd taken from storage the night before. "You might want to see this," she said without looking up. Her fingers rested on a folded envelope, yellowing slightly around the edges, tucked between the pages labeled Legacy Lineage. My name was handwritten on the front, nothing else. I took it slowly. The paper felt fragile, like the secrets it held. As I opened it, the scent of rain lingered in the air, a reminder of the storms we had weathered. What would I find inside? Would it be a key to my past or another layer of confusion? The weight of the moment pressed down on me, and I could feel my heart racing. Would this revelation finally bring clarity, or would it plunge me deeper into uncertainty? Only time would tell. The seal had never been closed. No stamp, no date. But the handwriting was unmistakably my mother's. Precise, angular, slightly leaning right, as if always preparing to justify itself. I sat by the window, sunlight streaming in, and began to read. "Hannah, if you're reading this, then I've either grown brave or someone else has done it for me. I don't know what you think of me anymore. Maybe nothing. And maybe worse than nothing. But there are things I need to say, even if they're too late. I knew you were different from the beginning. Not just bright. Brilliant. You watched the world like it was a puzzle always half solved, and that terrified me. You see, I was raised to believe that men lead and women preserve. That we follow, we smooth edges, we fill in gaps. You never accepted that role. You wanted a map of your own, and I didn't know how to mother that. So, I tried to mold you, and when that didn't work, I tried to erase the parts I didn't understand. I told myself I was protecting you from disappointment, from loneliness, from what the world does to women who don't stay small. But really, I was protecting myself from your shadow, from the guilt of knowing I wasn't enough to raise you properly. You would surpass me. I knew that early, and so I began to block you quietly, subtly. The letter of recommendation that never got sent. The call to my friend at Fort Bragg. I forgot to make the application that somehow missed the deadline. Each one a pebble in your path. Each one wrapped in the word love. But it wasn't love, was it? Not really. It was fear, and fear dressed up as motherhood still bruises the same. I paused. My hands had started to tremble. Margaret was silent across the room, pretending not to watch. The room held its breath. Lucas was easier. He needed me. He adored me. You didn't. You challenged me, and I hated how much I admired you for it. If I could do it over, I might choose to love you instead of fear you. That was the final line. No signature. As I sat there, the weight of her words pressed down on me, a mix of love and regret. Would this revelation finally bring clarity, or would it plunge me deeper into uncertainty? The flickering candle nearby cast shadows on the wall, dark reminders of everything I thought I understood. What would I do with this truth? Would I confront her neglect? Or would I let it define me? Only time would tell. I sat there, letting the silence seep into the cracks where the letter couldn't reach. No justifications. No apologies. Just raw admission, and somehow that felt heavier. Margaret moved softly as if afraid to shatter the moment. "She never mailed it," she whispered. "I found it years ago, tucked away in the genealogy records. I kept it, unsure if I'd ever show it to you." "I'm glad you did," I replied, my heart racing. "What will you do with it?" I glanced at the envelope again, then stood and walked to the fireplace. The embers still glowed from the night before. I placed the letter inside, unfolded, and struck a match. The flames curled around it, the ink fading into ash. I didn't need it framed or published. Just one line lingered in my mind, etched forever. If I could do it over, I might choose to love you instead of fear you. That was the closure I craved. Then came the knock. Hesitant, uneven. 3 taps, a pause, then one more, as if he was unsure of himself. I opened the door slowly, bracing for whatever version of him stood on the other side. Lucas was there, wearing an old hoodie and khaki pants wrinkled at the knees. He looked smaller, not in size, but in spirit. The effortless charm he usually wore had slipped away, leaving him vulnerable. "Hi," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paper. Margaret had sent another stack of archival letters for the memoir I was finishing. I gestured toward the couch. He sat back, hands clasped tightly as if waiting for something to strike him. I didn't speak. I waited. "I've been thinking," he began, staring at the floor, "about what happened, about everything." Silence hung between us. "I used to think it was harmless," he continued, "borrowing a little credit, letting them assume. Dad always said, it's all part of the machine, right appearances. But what about the truth? What about the weight of our family's expectations?" The rain outside began to patter against the window, the scent of wet earth filling the air. I could feel the tension rising, the unspoken words swirling around us. Would we ever break free from this cycle? Would we confront the shadows of our past, or let them define our future? In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about Lucas or me. It was about breaking the chains of neglect and fear that had bound us for so long. It was time to reclaim our stories, to confront the ghosts that lingered in the corners of our lives. Would we rise together, or would we remain trapped in the echoes of our family's indifference? Only time would tell. The air was thick with unspoken truths as I faced him. "What did you think when you signed your name on that final report?" I asked, my voice steady. He winced, and I could see the weight of his choices pressing down on him. At first, I thought it was just a phase, that someone would step in and fix it. But then he exhaled, and the accolades started pouring in. The awards, the invites, the press. It became harder to imagine stepping aside. I studied him closely. "So you didn't?" "No." His eyes finally met mine, glassy and filled with regret. "At some point, I convinced myself you didn't care. If you wanted the credit, you would have taken it." I didn't respond. I let that silence linger, heavy with the 1,000 choices I had made to stay quiet. For family, for peace, for fear. "I watched your speech," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one about the scholarship. The way you said you weren't giving up the name, that you were redefining it." "I meant it," I replied, my heart racing. He nodded, understanding. "I came because I needed to say it, even if it doesn't matter now. I was afraid, not of you, but of what you would become if people actually saw you, because I knew the moment they did, I would disappear." His voice cracked on that last word, and I let the stillness settle between us. "And did you?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. He looked at me, really looked. "Yes, and I deserved it." A beat passed. "Grace," he whispered, "can you forgive me?" I leaned back slightly, keeping my voice calm. "That's not something I owe you," I said, "but I hope one day you'll earn it from yourself." Some medals glint under spotlights, but this one shone in silence. The desert wind carried its own kind of hush, as if it understood the weight of secrets. The base lay 2 hours past the last highway, hidden by heat and distance. No signs, no press, no flags waving in ceremonial rhythm, just concrete, steel, and discipline. I had been here before, years ago, just a name on a rotation list. Back then, I wasn't supposed to command, just observe, just stay invisible. Today was different. Lieutenant Colonel Rowe met me at the gate with a clipboard and a half smile. "Still hate Palm?" she asked. "Still allergic," I replied, taking the black lanyard she handed me. As I stepped inside, the scent of rain lingered in the air, mingling with the rustle of leaves outside. Would I finally confront the shadows of my past? Would I reclaim my story, or let it slip away like so many before? Only time would tell. No insignia, just clearance. They were ready. The ceremony room felt more like a cramped storage space than a place of honor. 20 chairs lined up in 2 tight rows, no banners, no brass bands, no high-ranking generals reciting empty praises, just the people who mattered, the ones who truly knew. I recognized a few faces, those who had followed my briefings, trusted my voice when visibility dropped to 0. Roe stepped up to the podium, exuding a calm confidence that didn't need to impress anyone. "We don't record these citations," she began, "but we remember them. This one's overdue." There was no scroll, no gold foil certificate, just a small black velvet box. She opened it with reverence, turning to me. "For distinguished leadership in operations classified under Black File Authority, with exceptional conduct in multinational joint environments, we award Brigadier General Grace Halberg the DLD designation." The room didn't erupt in applause. It stood in silence, a silence that said, "We see you." I stepped forward, my hands steady. When she pinned the medal onto my chest, bare of ribbon, starched but unembellished, I felt no rush of adrenaline, just a sense of alignment. It was as if the world had finally stopped spinning off its axis. After a brief nod, I moved to the side of the room. A junior officer, barely 22, leaned in as I passed. "They say you turned down a senior appointment," she whispered, eyes wide, "to stay in the field with us." I didn't respond, just smiled. It was true, not out of fear of the top, but because I never wanted to lead from a balcony. I wanted to be where things happened, where real weight lived. Later, in the dormitory-turned-guest quarters, I unpacked slowly. Margaret's handwriting peeked from a cream envelope tucked into my travel bag. She must have slipped it in before I left. I sat by the window, the base lights barely glinting on the sand outside, and unfolded the letter. As Roe's voice echoed in the small room, a sudden hush fell over the crowd, thick with unspoken words. The black velvet box gleamed under the dim lights, but it was the weight of the moment that pressed down on my chest. Just as I prepared to step forward, a figure emerged from the shadows. My estranged brother, a ghost from my past. His presence shattered the silence, igniting a storm of emotions. Why was he here? The air crackled with tension, and my heart raced as I faced the unexpected truth of our fractured ties. "Grace," he whispered, his voice trembling, "can you forgive me?" I leaned back slightly, keeping my voice calm. "That's not something I owe you," I said, "but I hope one day you'll earn it from yourself." Some medals glinted under spotlights, but this one shone in silence. The desert wind carried its own kind of hush, as if it understood the weight of secrets. The base lay 2 hours past the last highway, hidden by heat and distance. No signs, no press, no flags waving in ceremonial rhythm, just concrete, steel, and discipline. I had been here before, years ago, just a name on a rotation list. Back then, I wasn't supposed to command, just observe, just stay invisible. Today was different. Lieutenant Colonel Roe met me at the gate with a clipboard and a half smile. "Still hate palm?" she asked. "Still allergic," I replied, taking the black lanyard she handed me. As I stepped inside, the scent of rain lingered in the air, mingling with the rustle of leaves outside. Would I finally confront the shadows of my past? Would I reclaim my story, or let it slip away like so many before? Only time would tell. You don't need cameras to be remembered. They tried to erase the girl who stood tall, who refused to bow, who never asked for permission. But the world remembers truth louder than any ceremony. The girl they tried to erase has become the woman history will remember. Ink lasts longer than inheritance. The final sentence flowed from my pen easier than I expected. I didn't even realize my hand had stopped trembling until I set the pen down and looked back at the filled pages, 243 of them. The invisible general written in the margins of war, between deployments in bunks, briefings, and coffee shops that never asked why I sat alone. I had written most of it in longhand, an old habit I refused to break. Type came later, but ink was personal. Ink carried weight. Margaret was the first to read it. She finished in 2 days. When she handed the pages back, her eyes were moist but steady. "You didn't write to hurt them," she said. "You wrote to free yourself. The publisher didn't ask for edits. They only wanted to know when I could speak about it." I said no at first. I wasn't interested in a book tour. I didn't want the spotlight. But then came the invitation from the academy. Not the main hall, just a workshop. Closed doors. 10 cadets, all women, all first-generation military. The session was called Leading Without Permission. I stood before them in a small classroom with mismatched chairs and flickering fluorescent lights. Not exactly history-making, but something about the quiet in the room felt monumental. We didn't start with rank or rules. I began with a question. "What's the first thing they told you you couldn't do?" A dozen hands shot up. "Speak up, take command, apply for special ops." "Disagree." I nodded. "You're here now. That means you already didn't listen." Laughter bubbled, a little hesitant but real. Midway through, a young woman with dark braids and a steady stare raised her hand. "What do I do when no one believes in me?" Just as I was about to respond, my phone pinged, an unexpected email from my estranged father. The message was simple yet powerful, containing a picture of the family I thought had forgotten me, a family reunion where my absence was palpable. The realization hit hard. I wasn't just confronting my past, I was on the cusp of rewriting it. This sudden outreach demanded a response. The air grew heavy with both apprehension and hope, intertwining in my chest like coils of defiance and anticipation. Would I step into the light of reconciliation, or retreat into the shadows of neglect? The past clashed with the possibility of a new beginning. What would I choose? The air in the room shifted as Hannah Monroe felt the weight of the cadet's note pressing against her palm. Her heart raced, the scribbled words igniting a mix of hope and uncertainty. Did she truly make a difference? The silence felt deafening, the walls closing in as the applause began to fade, leaving her standing alone on the stage. Shadows of doubt crept in. What if this moment wasn't enough to shift the tide? The echo of a whisper caught her off guard. "Are you ready to confront the truth?" For a heartbeat, she saw herself younger, angrier, quieter, sitting in the back, always overlooked. "You don't wait for belief," she reminded them, her voice steady. "You act as if it's already there." The energy in the room shifted with that simple wisdom. We kept going. Tactics, ethics, how to lead without copying those who shouted orders. They asked the questions she once feared, about integrity, loneliness, legacy. By the end of the 2-hour session, their energy transformed, no longer eager but anchored. They didn't need saving. They needed someone who had lived through it. As the cadets filed out, one lingered. She was small, nervously fidgeting beneath her perfect posture. Handing Hannah a folded scrap of paper, she darted away before anyone could notice. Inside, Hannah found a simple line. "You changed how I see myself." This time, they announced her name first. Stepping onto the stage, she wasn't just a guest. She was the one delivering the words. The spring sun poured through Arlington Hall's glass dome, casting lines of gold across the polished floor. Rows of cadets stood at attention, nerves barely contained beneath layers of pride. Their families filled the seats, anticipation buzzing in the air. Hannah thought back to when she'd once sat there. Now her turn to speak. "You've earned your rank," she began. "But the truth is, Many of you have already led without it, without permission, without applause. Letting the silence orbit her words, she added, "You don't need to be listed to belong. You don't need to be introduced to be unforgettable. And you don't need recognition to know you're right." Her eyes swept the room, locking onto a familiar figure in the shadows. Lucas. No uniform, no ceremony, just him standing watch, clapping. Would this moment finally bring the acknowledgement Hannah craved, or was it just another fleeting recognition against a backdrop of neglect? As the emotions swirled like a storm inside her, she pressed on, ready to uncover a truth that had long eluded her. I had my doubts. This moment wasn't about me. It was about what I stood for. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just moved forward. The first name on the graduation list was Lieutenant Evelyn Sharp, a fierce cadet who once asked me, "What do I do when they say I don't belong here?" Well, she belonged now. I called her name. She marched forward, and I pinned her insignia not over her heart, as tradition dictated, but right at her collarbone, where it would be seen, where no one could ignore it. The same spot I had once been denied. Margaret sat in the front row, a small American flag folded on her lap, her expression radiant yet calm. We didn't need words anymore. The work spoke volumes. More names followed, more shoulders squared, more voices carried the oath. After the last cadet returned to formation, I stepped back to the microphone. "Let them say I broke tradition," I declared. "I was never raised to preserve the ones that erased me." She had once been erased from a program. Now she was rewriting the rules others would follow. What began as silence born from fear ended in a name spoken with reverence. Because when injustice meets quiet defiance and relentless truth, no lie survives the spotlight forever. Some legacies are inherited, but the ones forged through pain and principle last longer. Did you feel that? The weight of every unspoken struggle? The story isn't just mine. It's ours. It's